Welcome to the Jobs and Work podcast. If you're like most Americans, you spend a significant amount of your time working. In fact, we spend more time at our jobs than anywhere else. But how often do we really talk about work in America? On this podcast, the Work for Change team will. Work for Change, LLC is a team of social scientists, thought leaders, and digital storytellers who dig into the critical issues affecting American workers and workplaces today. Our podcast is co-hosted by Dr. Kendra Jason and myself, Dr. Kris Maycumber. We'll also bring guests onto the show who reflect the diversity of the American workforce. We are so excited for you to join us as we lead the efforts to humanize the workplace by building dignity and equity into jobs, work, and organizations. Please subscribe to the podcast and share us with your friends and family. You can learn more about Work for Change at workforchangellc.com. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Jobs and Work podcast. This is episode 8, and I am your co-host, Kris Maycumber.
And I'm co-host Kendra Jason.
And today the theme is Conversations with Kendra and Kris. And what we're going to be talking about is the trend that has been dubbed the COVID pivot, which refers to the fact that many Americans, millions, have changed jobs during COVID.
Yep. And before we jump into this topic, I want to give a quick shout out to some small businesses today. I am wearing a t-shirt. We got some Work for Change swag from a small business out of Charlotte called LJ Creations. I am also wearing some earrings from a small business, again, out of North Carolina called Suede Designs. These little button earrings are cute, and she does them in all kind of designs. And then finally, I really encourage you. I was inspired today. I didn't use her services, but I was inspired by Crystal Latta, who was one of the brave ones who took our first How to Start Your Own Business workshop. She has a business called Styled by Kay, and I always follow her on social media, and she says, accessorize, liven it up. And so I'm wearing a scarf, which Kris knows I never do. I put on some fancy earrings in order to dress up my t-shirt. So I just wanted to give a shout out to those small businesses doing their thing. Kris is going to drop their contact information below so that you can check them out for yourself. Another thing I want to quickly say that I'm really excited about is that Work for Change, the company that Kris and I run, has been doing very, very well just in our first quarter of business. I mean, really, we just had our business launch in January, and we have already secured 2 full contracts. We had one training, and then we just secured a 6-month training series on with some nonprofit work. And so we're really excited. Things are working really well. And so we encourage you to check out our website, look at our services, and see what we can offer you as well. One thing that I was thinking about with the people who have been contacting us are companies who really want to respond to the call for social justice and to do things better for their workers, which is why we founded Work for Change, right? Companies want to do better, and workers want to enjoy the work that they do. And so companies have reached out to us about unconscious bias, implicit bias, different types of prejudice that they may hold and not know, so that they can do their jobs better. So on one end, we noticed that there's a lot of movement with employees trying to retain their workers by better meeting their needs through this call for social justice. But on the other end, we are getting a lot of feedback from people who want to change jobs for different reasons. As Kris noted, it may be COVID, they lost their job, or but a lot of people aren't necessarily losing their jobs, but between the 2 instances of social justice and COVID-19, people are really reconsidering their options. Do I really want to work for this company? Do they suit me well? And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, thanks, Kendra, for that intro. So the COVID pivot, as it has been referred to, is this trend we've seen mostly occurring during 2020, during COVID, and millions of Americans are changing careers sometimes because they have lost their job. Their industry has been impacted dramatically by, shutdowns and shelter in place and businesses being closed. But there's also a wide swath of people who are contemplating career changes because they're working from home and they're starting to reflect and they're starting to reconsider. And what happens is during these times of life shifts, people tend to reprioritize things. We start assessing. I think that's what COVID has done for many of us, is forced us to just assess, because you're not maybe as busy for some people. Now, there are many people, millions of Americans whose day-to-day life has not been altered professionally. They've had to go to work, the same jobs all the time, that hasn't shifted. But for millions, it has. And people are like, Kendra, like you said, questioning, do I really want to be at this job? Is my employer supporting my career goals? Is this a place that I feel valued, et cetera? So one of the things that there's been a lot of polls and surveys coming out, and what we know is that 1 in 4 women have actually changed careers during COVID. MetLife just came out with a survey late 2020, and 2 out of 5 women are now considering STEM for the first time ever. So they're saying that, I think maybe part of that, we'd have to dig deeper, is they're at home, many who are mothers are at home managing online learning, probably figuring out like this technology thing isn't, I got a handle on this now. I know how to navigate these programs. So 2 out of 5 women are now considering STEM fields. So the STEM world is responding to that and doing a lot of outreach, trying to say, look, we have this increase in women who want to join STEM fields. So there's been a lot of industry shifting. People have different interests and priorities. And then I think employers are going to have to respond to that.
Yeah, I was thinking also, I think it was Forbes.com that came out with an article that said about 50% of university professors have considered leaving their jobs in the midst of COVID-19. And again, it's that self-reflection. I think, and again, Kris and I, there's no study necessarily on this, but I think a part of, that reconsideration is that, the more education that you have, the more options that you have, right? And so people with PhDs and master degrees, they may have, more flexibility and more room to stretch in a way that they haven't before. But we have a whole nother population of workers, essential workers, low wage workers who have to grind harder to make ends meet in the midst of COVID-19, because they're losing hours and they're losing work, or they're in compromising situations when it comes to their exposure to COVID-19. So it's a really bifurcated situation as well.
Yeah, right. Because one of the things that it's a privilege to say, what are my priorities at work? How can I find a job where I can prioritize myself? Right. And oftentimes what we do is we tend to cut ourselves off from our work. Right. There's like the job, and then there's our, what we like to do, our personal lives. And I think for many people, COVID, made them pause and say, I want a job that is more fulfilling to me personally. Right. But that, again, I think that speaks to privilege, to be able to say, well, I'm going to find one. I mean, people who are living paycheck to paycheck don't have the opportunity to hit pause and say, well, let me explore other options, or let me go back to school for 6 months, get some certifications, brush up on my skills. So definitely, any kind of major cultural shift, Kendra, like we always talk about this, any existing inequalities will just be exacerbated, reproduced, replicated, right? So for those who have more resources, who have education, who have job training, who have more, who have those resources, that cultural capital, the sort of educational capital, you can trade that in. It's like you can constantly exchange that for opportunities. And if you don't have those, you don't have access to those, then it's a lot harder to say, I'm going to shift gears.
And, I was thinking on a more like philosophical approach or even spiritual approach. Another thing that COVID-19 did in this self-reflection is people started thinking, you know what, I only have one life to live. And I'm not going to live it in a job that I'm unhappy with, or a job where I don't feel valued, or a job where I can't spend time with my kids, or a job that doesn't pay me enough, right? I'm going to, like you were saying about the women, I'm going to invest in myself and maybe pursue a new career, or, change jobs, or, start my own business. And so, one of the things that I think COVID has opened up for people is it broke procrastination chains, if you will. Like, people were just like, I'll do it later, or I'll do it when I have time. One thing, COVID gave a lot of people a lot of time. But another thing is that, in this sort of greater philosophical question about self-contribution, what legacy will I live? What kind of life do I want to live? How much time do I have left? And we, almost all of us have to work, right? And so that's why with Work for Change, our central goal is to make work experiences better, because we understand we all have to work, unless you're super, super rich, right? And those people still work in many cases too. And so it doesn't have to be a drag. It doesn't have to be you pulling yourself out of bed. Once I started Work for Change, I shifted my whole schedule. I wake up now at 5:45 in the morning, which I have not done since high school. Because I'm motivated in a different way. I'm working for myself, and I'm motivated by the good work that I'm doing, and I feel like I'm contributing in a different way. And it's not burdensome to wake up then. I don't have to convince myself. I mean, sometimes I try to sleep in a little bit, but I always get up and show up with Kris.
Yeah, there is something exciting about creating, something new, right? That kind of makes people feel, excited, and there's like opening up the window and letting fresh air in, right? And that's like a energizing feeling. So something that I want to come back to that you said is how our priorities shifted. One of the Forbes pieces I've read about the COVID pivot talked about how people are reassessing what is now important to them. And because we have been working, a lot of people have been working remotely, they're now really valuing flexibility of schedules. Because, employers have had to say, well, we know that a lot of you are taking care of kids and working from home. So we're going to be flexible about when you come in, if you come in at all. And what we're seeing is that employers are now saying there's no going back. Like, people want the flexibility. So I think what we're going to see is the long-term way that employers and the workplaces will continue to have to humanize people, because people are now, we've been forced to say we are humans with needs that extend beyond the workplace. So what we saw in that Forbes piece is people are now prioritizing flexibility of schedule, autonomy over their schedule, saying like, I need to work 4 hours and then I need a 2-hour break because my kids have a 2-hour break. And then I need, so kind of controlling over their schedule, the option to work remotely, Flex Jobs. Flex Jobs is a database that tries to link people with like flexible jobs and schedules. Just that 23 major companies, Amazon, American Express, Capital One, Dropbox, Microsoft, just to name a few, are now saying we are creating long-term flexible jobs because we're not going to go back to what it was like pre-COVID. And I think that's a huge, profound shift.
Kris, this is such a great point, because it it makes my ears ache when I hear managers and workplaces talking about this rush to get back to normal and this need to get back to normal. And I think people have said it over and over again. Normal wasn't working, right? Normal was oppressive. I mean, work conditions were not great in 2019 and before, right? And so, employers, so one thing about employers, there's not a blanket solution for everyone. This goes back to what Kris was saying about knowing who your employees are. Do your employees want to go back to the way it was in 2019 and prior? Or are your employees now wanting something new and innovative and flexible? The suggestions that Kris noted. And as an employer, you have to understand that, because if you're pushing for normal and your employees need flexibility or they need new adaptation, then you're not speaking to each other, and you're going to lose workers because there are too many employers that are now taking on this philosophy of flexible work arrangements and making these accommodations for working mothers and different things. And so you really have to understand where your workers are, what your workers' needs are, so that you can adapt as an employer so that you can retain your workers.
Right. And I think, to your point, we need to have these conversations too with, I think, young people. When I talk to them about just asking a question, sometimes just asking, like, what do you look for in a job, or what do you think makes a good job? What are the characteristics of a good job? And I've had young people, who are like around that college age, as they're considering careers, say things like, they can list all of these ideals of a good job.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to be somewhere where work is collaborative,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm an introvert, so I want to be somewhere where I don't need to interact with people all of the time. And I want to be compensated well, or I want time off. I want good health benefits. I want a workplace community. I want to go somewhere and find friends at work, right? So people have all of these different qualities of job, that they look for that makes a good job. Mm-hmm. But I think what happens is once we get into a job, we just we lose that idea of like, is this a good job for me? Is this hitting the characteristics, right? Because we got bills to pay, we got, we have to eat and survive and make ends meet. But I think if we just continue to come back to that question, like, what makes for a good job? And then we can sort of like try to build that into the workplace. And I don't know how often employers are asking that of themselves. Like, does my workplace, the way that I lead my workplace, that how I structure it, part of what we do is help employers think about those big questions. Mm-hmm. So the individuals will have these experiences, but those exist in a context, and we help people see that larger context. So asking those big questions, like, do I provide a structure and a culture where people feel like they have a good job?
Yeah, I was thinking too that workplace cultures can shift and change. Mm-hmm. And a part of that question asking that Kris is talking about is ensuring that the perception, the culture, the workplace perception that managers have actually match the experiences that their workers are having, right? Because the managers can think they created this wonderful work experience, but it gets lost in translation, and the workers don't experience it in the way that the managers think they crafted a workplace culture to be. And so a part of that communication is really assessment, right? A part of that communication is understanding, like, are we on the same page? Are we moving in the right direction? Are we moving together? And if not, there are things that we can do, small things. Everything doesn't have to be a huge organizational overhaul, right? Yeah. What are the small things that we can do to shift our culture in a way that is more responsive to the needs and the desires of our workers? Again, so job satisfaction goes up, productivity goes up, and retention goes up. And those are the things that managers want, right? And so, and job satisfaction are the thing, and more productivity actually is what workers want, because typically it should be, with more productivity, there's better compensation. So it should be a win-win if we can be on the same page, or you can be on the same page as far as what you're offering for your workplace culture.
Yeah, right. And I think to your point too, Kendra, change doesn't always mean cost, like a huge increase in cost. Change can be just shifting things around. So it isn't always like it means like a major transformation where nothing will resemble what it was like before. It could be the way that you communicate, figuring out that, okay, our pathways of communication are not as transparent as we thought they were. People are losing things in translation, as you said, or we're not, what we realized is email isn't the best way to communicate things because people are overloaded with their inbox. So what we're going to do is, cut down on emails and have a face-to-face meeting or a Zoom meeting one day a week. We all know people are burnt out of meetings. We have meetings about meetings about meetings, right? So they're sort of, finding new ways to communicate information. Maybe, and that's where I think consultants can come in like Work for Change and say, how are you doing it? What's working? What's not working? How, and tailoring it to that business, because every business has its own unique structure as well, and its unique workforce. So it's not like there's never a one size fits all, but it's coming up with what works for them.
Yeah, and so what we want to sort of wrap up with is that, right now is a really interesting time for everyone. It is a time for transition on the part of workplaces, managers, and on the part of workers. And so what I want you to consider as an employee is that this is not, right now is an opportunity for you to demand, or at least communicate, what you need from your employer. Because right now they're more susceptible to listening because they're already in a transitional, goal seeking mode. And so communicate what you need, demand what you need, whatever relationship you have with your employer, and see how your employer responds. On the other end, it's a great time of transition for you as a potential employee at another organization or working for yourself. And so, we just want to, help you capitalize on this moment of self-growth or self-transition, or transitioning with your company in a way that better meets your needs. We want to remind you that we do offer a starting your own business workshop. The offering this month will be March 20 and 27th. It's a 2-part workshop. You can go to our website, which is work4changellc.com, and get more information, sign up. We make it accessible and affordable for everyone. In the meantime, we would like you to like, share, and subscribe to all of our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and of course you found us here on YouTube. So please, like I said, like and subscribe and share so that we can work to make the world of work better.